Don't clap for this bit. Hello? Oh, fantastic. Right, good evening and welcome to this, the first emergency debate of term, and indeed the first union debate of term. It's a pleasure to have you all here. So before we get into the emergency debate, one announcement from me. Though some of you might be interested in inviting speakers and making preparations for next term, we have to get these things started very early, so we're beginning to, get that ball rolling. So if you'd like to help out with inviting speakers for debates or for speaker events next term, you can do so by joining President's Committee or Speakers Committee, which works on, those two things. So if you'd like to be involved in that process, I assure you it really isn't as boring as it sounds. Send an email to me, presidentelect@cus.org. And we can set you up. It really is a tremendous way to help out, and it is actually tremendously enjoyable. So, with that said, on to the emergency debate for tonight. So, a brief prologue to this emergency debate is that we sent 3 teams to the World Debating Championships in India over the Christmas break, and they enjoyed considerable success. 3 of them reached the octo-finals, 1 of them reached the grand final, and we also had 2 of the top 10 speakers in the world. So, these are some of the people who form part of that delegation, and they'll be comprising the speakers tonight. So with expectations suitably raised, we might as well proceed with tonight's emergency debate. So the motion is this House would ban politicians from having social media accounts. The speeches will be 5 minutes in length. There'll be 2 rounds of floor speeches between the second and third speeches, in which contributions in proposition of the motion, opposition, or indeed abstention are warmly encouraged. I don't think there's anything else I'm supposed to say, so with that, I'd like to welcome Ashish Kumar to open the case for the proposition. Hear, hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, believe me when I say that there's literally no political bias you have that I cannot confirm by anecdote. The problem that Ben and I think exists in the status quo is that we are raising a generation whose interaction with politics is through being drip-fed, sordid, platitudinous bullshit that's being churned out by the dark satanic mills of politicians, spin doctors. We think that's rather unfortunate, so we'd like to ban politicians from having social media accounts. Just to be very clear what exactly we're standing for. We're happy for them to use other avenues. If they want to write an article in the HuffPo where they actually do things like give reasons, which they don't do on social media, we're happy for them to do that. We are also not claiming that these are problems that are unique to social media. But what we will say is that social media exhibits these particular problems to a much greater degree than any other avenue like the printed media or online news does. 2 points today. The first is a fairly fun point about self-selection bias, that sort of jazz. My second slightly more boring point is about why you don't really get much good information or discourse and you get personality politics from social media and politicians. So, firstly, bias. Democracy presumes that we are able as individuals to rationally weigh up competing choices, if not perfectly, at least to some extent. It is in the interest of democracy that people's pre-rational biases get decreased. We think social media is problematic, and politicians using social media is problematic because they almost exclusively use these accounts to inform and to make these biases stronger through several ways. The first is because problems of self-selection are especially prominent on social media. Twitter and Facebook have no interest in causing us to engage with people whose views are different from ours and who might therefore make us quite uncomfortable. So the most obvious problem is that we only ever follow those individuals on Twitter or on Facebook who we agree with. I quite like Obama because I'm a Democrat, and I'm a hypocrite because I do exactly what this motion thinks I should not be doing. But all the updates I get are only from Democrats, no thank you. And the impression I get of Democrats is they go for Christmas parties, they post these lovely anecdotes about one individual who got help by the Affordable Care Act, that sort of stuff. It's not representative, and I only hear stuff from the people I already think are correct. It's an echo chamber, and it reinforces the biases I have towards a particular political party. But secondly, thank you, social pressures are especially strong on these social media sites, because if most of my friends who are obviously going to be Democrat as well for reasons that are probably quite obvious, are going to like a post that Obama puts up, I feel social pressure to do the exact same thing as well. But lastly, even the algorithms on Facebook, the kind of things it presents me with are obviously based on things that I already have a preference for. So the only thing that allowing politicians to have, all these social media sites do is to allow them to reinforce biases that we already have. It doesn't increase democratic debate. And they're going to say, oh, Fox News does the same thing. Yes, it's true, Fox News does the same thing. But occasionally, Fox News still needs to bring on a Democrat and beat them over the head to gain some sort of credibility, whereas a politician totally controls his account. There's no oversight whatsoever. The control that Rupert Murdoch has over the news media is a lot less than what one biased politician has over his own account. So we think compared to all the other kinds of media, these things are actually particularly bad. Yeah, Jia, go for it. No, it's not. We'd quite like to ban him too, to be honest. But the problem is that, unfortunately, we have one Bill O'Reilly on TV right now. Every politician, when they get their account, becomes like a little Bill O'Reilly, sitting in their own sordid kingdom of lies, misrepresentation, and pandering in a rather pathetic manner to the so-called informed electorate. So, no, we don't think that's appropriate at that comparison. Second point, therefore, why we don't think you actually get good information. Basically, if all your political views can be summed up by 140 characters, we don't think you probably deserve to have them heard. And we think most politicians actually have much more complicated views than these. They have reasons for believing certain things. But these are never things that are conveyed on social media. Because I'm sure the moment some Facebook argument pops up, someone will go, too long, didn't read, lol, you're a bit of a nerd, aren't you, right? So the entire culture on these sites is against democratic discourse and engagement. What does work, however, on Twitter and Facebook? What does work is lying. What does work is slander. What does work is personality politics. Trying to give people the impression that because US Obama put presents under the kid of some American guy at Christmas, you are a nice guy. And in a political climate where already parties are too separated from each other, where personality politics prevents us from assessing process in a rational and meaningful manner, we think the sordid personality politics that these sites promulgate is incredibly damaging to our democracy. Ultimately, this also puts people off, because I'm sure that if we think politics is all terrible and boring, we get quite apathetic towards it as well. Look, politicians are a necessary evil of this thing we've got called representative democracy. We think this policy reduces a bit of that necessary evil and gives us quite a few benefits. For that reason, I'm actually quite proud to propose a marginally insane policy.
Thank you very much, Ashish. Our next speaker is Thomas Simpson, who is, in addition to being a student at Gonville and Keyes College, the new debating officer here at the Cambridge Union. Tom.
Mr. Speaker, we think that cool politicians are cool, and we want to help them succeed. Because the boring old farts who are unable to use Twitter, we're happy for them to die out when it is only their press secretary tweeting or posting bizarre links, which no one is actually going to read. We want to help those who are willing to engage and are willing to be involved with young people, and that's why we think engagement on social media is good. 3 issues in this debate. First, Ashish's stuff on discourse. Secondly, why some politicians are idiots and how this allows us to find them out. And thirdly, young people like Twitter. First, to discourse. So Ashish said, well, it's bad because you can only encapsulate things in 140 characters. Well, there's this thing, Ashish, called #TTRTTPT, which you can use to extend the amount of, as tweets that refer to the previous tweet. And you have people putting on longer discussions as a result. Furthermore, when you post your 140 characters, you can link to stuff. So you can have the HuffPo article that you want, but you can actually promote it because it actually shows up in people's news feeds as opposed to just being on the HuffPo where people self-select into reading that in the same sorts of negative ways Ashish wanted to talk about. No, thank you. Ashish never told us why this was any different to the other types of self-selection we see with people just reading the Daily Mail or just choosing to watch Fox News. It wasn't good enough for him to say, we'd stop all discourse because there might be some bias through that. He needed to actually engage with the reality of how that worked. Let's look at this at our first substantive point. We think that some politicians are idiots, and when they're commenting more frequently on social media, it's far easier to find that out. When people like have the costs reduced of putting across their stupid views, they're more likely to do so. So what this means is that it's way easier to like simply chuck in your bizarre views in 140 characters than it is to write an article for the HuffPo. That means if like a politician suddenly gets gripped by an amazing response they think they have, they can simply just type it in. And then that means that if it is wrong, we get to see their true impulses and get to see what an idiot they are. So when someone like David Lammy comments on the BBC's post about the Pope where it said, "Oh, will it be black or white smoke?" with, "Oh, don't you think this is a bit racist?" That shows that he's an absolute idiot and is someone that we shouldn't be respecting or voting for. Or when Ed Balls is so incompetent that he goes and searches for Ed Balls and he thinks he's searching for Ed Balls like to go on his profile, but actually types in a tweet with just the text Ed Balls. 15,000 tweets later, we can see that he's an idiot and we can have a good laugh about it. That's why that engagement is good. We show that some people are able to engage with young people better than others. Some people don't know the difference between a search bar and the place where you actually type your tweets. We think it's good that we shame politicians who have absolutely no idea about how technology works. But now let's look at how we do get some people involved. So we think that young people actually quite like Twitter and like Facebook. So politicians are able to reach out in a way they wouldn't otherwise be able to do if they're just going with Ashish's preferred model of writing articles in the HuffPo. Because the thing is, like, dissenting views still come up in my newsfeed because people click like and then it spams my newsfeed. So I still see that sort of thing. Or even if you have some left-wing echo chamber person tweeting at their favorite left-wing politician, "Oh, this tweet you had is amazing," then that still comes up in my Twitter feed because my friend has done that tweet at someone. So you still see people engaging with it and you see people engaging with that information that leads to greater outreach. Go.
The profit-driven news media will still trumpet it anyway. I mean, it might be more fun to be able to mock them online, but we get the same results on our same site anyway.
But the point is, if we have to wait for politicians to think because they have to write a 1,000-word blog post, they're less likely to say stupid things and reveal the moronic things that they actually believe. We think it's important that we find out what people actually believe. So, for example, we found out a lot of UKIP council candidates were absolutely mental last year because people trawled through their Twitter feed and dug up bizarre tweets where they said they supported things like castration for pedophiles and sending all the Romanians back. This allows us to catch out people who are racist because they may not think about a tweet they did a few years ago. This allows us to catch out these people, identify them, and then not vote for them. We think that's a good thing. We get better engagement and we get to have a good laugh about Ed Balls. That's why we should. That is why this is a ridiculous policy. #oppose.
Cheers, Tom. Now it's time for questions from the floor. Just a reminder to our millions of viewers who aren't here in the room at the moment, you can tweet your questions in, #PointInProposition, PointInOpposition. If you'd like to take advantage of that, please do, but I think the live stream's broken, so you probably don't have the choice. With that said, are there any points in proposition of the motion? Come on, guys. You sure? Come on. No. Oh, fantastic, yeah.
I just feel like you need some help. And I'm all you've got, so I'm sorry. I'm Kieran from Christ. Politics democratic politics has this problem that everything is incredibly short term. Everything has to happen in the next 4 years, or the opposition get the credit, so you don't actually want it to happen. And this Twitter, Facebook sort of stuff is actually making it even shorter, because I don't actually care if the very first thought Ed Balls has when he hears a new proposition is stupid. I don't care how stupid it is. I care what he actually thinks when he's actually had time to think about it. That's the important thing, when they've actually had a rational thought about it, as opposed to their very first, sarky comment. So can we try? I think it would actually help get politics into a slightly more long-term mind. If that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Kieran. Any points in opposition? Okay, Richard.
Richard Parkins, Trinity College. Mr. President-elect, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to confess to being one of those boring old farts who doesn't use Twitter. The proposer has given me some very good reasons why I shouldn't. I don't think there's anything useful on there. But I would like to draw your attention to that sign over there. Could you move your head slightly? Promoting free speech. Free speech means that you let people say what they want in the way that they want it. If you don't happen to like what they say, or you don't happen to like the medium that they use, that is no justification whatever in a free society for seeking to ban it. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. If you go on Facebook, please friend me. I don't have all that many. Any points in abstention? Yeah.
Hi, Jason, Girton College. I just want to say to both sides, I think you've got a very, very narrow definition of what you're determining social media to be. It seems like you're just thinking of Twitter, and actually we all know that there are many, many different types of social media, and a lot of your points have been about how the short-term limited time to construct arguments in like Twitter, whereas you've also got YouTube where you can do 10, 20-minute videos. You can actually get very, very detailed explanations, and you also got blogging sites where you can get also much more detailed and also much more instant feedback. So I think both sides need to recognize we're not just talking about Twitter, we are talking about other forms of social media.
Fantastic. Any more points in proposition? Rose, yeah. Have to run for that one.
Hello, hope it was worth the wait. Rosefield, Trinity College. I actually really loved your point about politicians just writing something stupid and us being able to look at that and hold them to account. But I think we're now moving into the era of post-ed balls, where people's press officers have gone, oh my God, you can't use that. Let me do your Twitter account. It's not politicians anymore. And I happen to know this because my cousin was briefly, for his sins, Ed Miliband's Twitter account.
Thanks, Rose. Any more points in opposition? I'm especially looking up to the gallery, which has hitherto been somewhat neglected. It's apparently willful abandon. Oh, right, fantastic. Thank you very much. And a final point in abstention? Yeah.
Yep, so I think kind of in this debate we've been assuming that the choice is if someone goes on social media and looks at a politician's so Facebook post or whatever, the alternative to that is reading the newspaper and looking at a really detailed political analysis. Actually, in the real world, that's not how people work. If you log onto Facebook and you don't like a politician, you'll probably click, some picture of a cat or someone's Tumblr account or something else that's more interesting on the internet. So probably we should avoid overestimating how interested in politics most people are, because for most people, I think having a politician liked on Facebook or Twitter or whatever provides a really sort of low apathy way of getting them interested.
Fantastic. That includes that concludes our floor speeches. So moving on to the final section of the main debate. When he's finished taking his notes, I'd like to invite up Ben Adams to continue the case for the proposition. Hear, hear.
Right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to talk to you about two things. The first thing is entitled Better Informed Voters, and the second thing is entitled Everything Else, because I couldn't really think of any more inventive way to group those points. I'm going to talk about everything else first, after a few points of rebuttal, before... This is everything else as well, but I haven't titled it everything else. Right, so first of all, to the very nattily dressed gentleman in the red. He says, we should allow this because we like free speech and this justifies social media. I mean, what Ashish and I are doing isn't limiting anyone's free speech, right? We're not limiting the opinions you can express. All we're doing is limiting the way in which you can express them. This is analogous to arguing, the gentleman, that he has a right to free speech, therefore he should be allowed to graffiti all the walls, because stopping him expressing his opinions in those ways is a limitation on his right to free speech. Clearly, it's not all we're doing is limiting the way in which he can express those opinions. We're also sort of fine with limiting free speech. We think that's what hate speech laws are for. We think that's what laws against, inciting racial hatred or inciting violence, all those things we're sort of fine with. We say they lead to benefits. Then they say, the gentleman over here mentioned, well, we're only really talking about Twitter. And he's right. It was most convenient for our case to talk about Twitter, so we mostly spoke about Twitter. But the harms we've talked about aren't actually just about Twitter. I mean, if you look at things like Cam on YouTube, I don't know if anyone remembers that. It was basically like a really cringeworthy video of David Cameron performing household chores before the last election. Like, David Cameron does the washing up. David Cameron pretends he cooks for his family. It's cringe. Less of that, great. And then the gentleman over here said, well, look, we get low apathy voters engaged in politics, and like some people who don't really care might vote now. That's a bad thing. We want them out of politics. We don't want people who don't know anything about it voting. They'll vote the wrong way. And as well as being elitist, this is actually very important, right? Because democratic... No, really. Look at the way working class people and very poor people in the American South consistently vote against their own economic self-interest. They vote for policies on the basis of lies because Reaganomics convinced them that trickle-down economics works. We don't need this kind of thing where you can just get people to trust you and get people to believe you because you've got a convincing Twitter account. It does actually lead to bad politics. So let's continue talking about everything else, particularly the things that T-Sims said. So he says, we think this will make politicians look cool. I mean, first of all, who are these cool politicians? I haven't seen any of them. But secondly, it wouldn't be the politician who was cool, right? Because the lie they've said is this politicians doing their own PR. They don't do their own PR. As the lady back there mentioned, it would be their PR doctor constructing for them an image that they are cool. They lie to people about what the personalities of their elected representatives actually are. We think insofar as people shouldn't be voting on the basis of lies, we're happy to get rid of that. And actually, he says, this will lead to less apathy. Actually, we think it leads to more apathy when people have the impression that democratic politics is just this sort of melange of 140-character insults battered back and forth on Twitter. We think actually the sort of sleaze culture and the cheap laughs and the cheap jibes that you get over Twitter are actually the things that drive people away from it. We think if politics was done in a more grown-up fashion, maybe through people having to do some reading, there'd be more respect for the process as a whole. And then he says, well, we're happy to keep the idiots out. We think idiots who don't know how to use social media shouldn't be doing politics. A couple of things on this. First of all, that would get rid of most of the cabinet, right? That would most of current politicians gone. But you also wouldn't get people who are necessarily more intelligent, right? You get people who are just as stupid but manage their PR better. That's not on our side a huge benefit, right? I mean, notice it also doesn't drive the idiots out of politics. Ed Ball yelled, Ed Balls, Ed Balls, Ed Balls, and he's still the Shadow Chancellor. Then he says, well, it lets us know that UKIP are racists. We knew UKIP were racists before UKIP got on Twitter. We know that because they say racist things, and racists vote for them. You don't... You don't need Farage's Twitter account. All you need is their manifesto, right? But also it sort of leads to this world in which, like, the very, very cheap jibes about people say things that could be construed as racists, and the other side jump on their tweet and try and drive them out in a bunch of populist anger. We think that's not healthy for politics. So let's talk about better informed voters. I mean, note that there wasn't a lot of response to what Ashish told you about why tweets are uniquely bad. Tweets are uniquely bad because you self-select into the kind of people you want to follow, and because within those tweets, the politicians have a literally unlimited and uncontested ability to make up their own stuff without challenge. And they're like, well, Fox News does that too. Actually, they do that to a lesser extent. Even Fox News came out against the Iraq War eventually. Even Bill O'Reilly started calling out the Iraq War as a bad idea before the Republican Party did. They're just not going to convince me that media, even right-wing media, is going to be less critical of the Conservative Party than the Conservative Party's representative itself. It's not perfect, but it's better than what we've got at the moment. Discourse is still going to happen, democracy is still going to happen, but it might be on the margins for some people a little bit better without this kind of stuff, and we're proud to propose it.
Thank you very much, Ben. Our final speaker is Wei Lee. Wei was not actually at the World Championships this year, but is rather a law student at Selwyn who debates intermittently with not inconsiderable success. So, without further ado, Wei.
That's one of those funny things. I don't actually know why we debate, because it's just basically a gigantic ego trip, right? Except from this, no one really cares. It's kind of like masturbating, you know. Except, it's, you know, you think you've won the battle, but actually you've lost the war. So, you know, but I don't know. I'm just being crass to get your attention, because I don't actually have anything to say. But yeah, I know, I'll give it a go. We'll try to talk about something that I'm woefully uninformed about, you know. Because as they say, where there's a will, there is a relative. See, I crack that joke every time, but no one laughs. Anyway, I'm going to talk about three things. The first thing is, can politicians lie on Twitter or Facebook? Or to put it another way, can politicians cover up corruption with more corruption? Secondly, do we have the freedom to be fools? And last of all, how do we engage with people who don't ordinarily care about politics? So number one, can politicians cover up corruption with more corruption? Cheap shots all round. They claim lying is very easy on Twitter. Yeah, we pointed out it's easy on the Daily Mail. It's easy on Facebook. Oh, sorry, not Facebook, sorry. On Fox. It's also easy on The Guardian. In fact, the particular problem with traditional news media, if you will, whether it's online or in print, is that it gives you the impression of engagement and discourse. Let me give you an example. Nigel Farage, or Farage, I can't actually pronounce his name, Nigel, printed an article basically misrepresenting the corpus juris, lying all around and covering it up all in technical language, and says, I've been to the prisons of Europe and they are horrible. People bought it. The problem was he was wrong. But because he had time to think about it and time to cultivate his lies in more than 140 words, people trusted him, regardless the opinions of other more credible individuals. That's exactly the problem with other sorts of news media. They all suffer from the issue of politicians tending to lie. The way to fix that is to make sure people are more educated. Make sure your teachers don't lie themselves. Make sure, no sir, that we are capable of responding to all these things. And we're going to point out that Facebook and Twitter are unique avenues through which you can respond immediately and directly to these people with a ready-made audience. Because if you think about it, if I send a letter in to the Independent, or say the Daily Mail, they might not publish it because they have their own political leanings on a certain platform. On the other hand, you can't really censor Facebook. If I posted something on Facebook, no thank you sir, it comes up instantly. If anyone wants to take it off their wall, they probably have to wait a little while. Someone has to monitor it. That little bit of time enables us to maybe take a screenshot, do anything, make sure that our message is heard. No. So comparatively, presumably, it's much more difficult to lie on Facebook than it is to lie in a newspaper. Then Ashish goes on to say, well, personality politics covers up the real issues at play. Well, it's not so much personality politics as it is politics, right? Every single election that you see in America, will necessarily not involve a great deal of policy discussion because there are too many policies. The easiest way to the people's hearts is to say, Mitt Romney was once a businessman, he really cares for you guys, or, no thank you sir, to play race politics, as arguably Barack Obama might have done, right? In fact, we're going to argue that it's much more difficult to play race politics, personality politics, on social media for the points that Thomas brought to you. Why is that? Because you might say something wrong by accident in 140 words. The point about 140 words, of course, is that you don't really have an incentive to tailor it all that well, no. You want to be casual, you want to be informal, you want to be accessible. The result, then, is that the involuntary reflex of your racism or the involuntary reflex of your sexism might emerge much more easily like it does in speeches. Like it does, as opposed, for example, to writing a full-fledged newspaper article. No, predicting that. In other words, personality politics or lying don't really occur in the arena, I suppose, of social media. Oh, I have 1 minute. I'm going to skip this whole point. Let's move on to engaging the youth and not talk about the freedom to be a fool. And basically, it's a great way of engaging people, right? Firstly, because people really like reading things that are 140 words and not 1,400 words long. That's why nobody wants to read anyone's dissertation in this area. Most importantly, we're going to be able to reach out to more people because people have figured out, on Facebook, I can post videos. On Facebook, I can post pictures of David Cameron dancing and doing, household chores and all that jazz. The important thing is, these links enable us to reach out to more different things. So if someone who ordinarily doesn't have an interest in politics, who is apathetic, as it were, comes on and says, hey, this is something interesting that David Cameron has said, or Ed Miliband has said, and clicks on a link, he becomes rather more informed than he was before. And presumably, this is net a better result than if he just didn't read any newspapers at all, right? Last point that I'm going to bring you about people voting stupidly. Ben says he wants to get rid of this, right? Like the American South. I'm going to draw my speech to a close very soon. My point is, who are you to decide for someone what he wants to vote for, what he wants to listen to decide what he wants to vote for? The American South may vote against their economic interests, but that might be because they have their own personal religious interests at stake, or their own personal social interests at stake. The point is, as the gentleman in the red jacket points out, we have the freedom of speech, and that implies the freedom to listen and respond to those things that we want to speak out about. So on all these three counts, this is a wonderful motion that we should all, well, actually, no, a terrible motion rather, that we should all oppose.
Thank you, JW. So, now it's time for the vote. Voting will be by acclamation, so those in favour of the motion shout aye, those opposed to the motion shout nay, and then those who are abstaining shout or some suitably non-committal sound. So, if on three, everyone in proposition could give their shout, 1, 2, 3. All those in opposition, 1, 2, 3. Nay. All those who really don't care, 1, 2, 3. The nays have it, the nays have it. The last thing to say is if any of you are interested in doing this for yourselves or alternatively getting sent on subsidized trips by the union to debating competitions and spending the whole time drunk and having fun, both are options. You can do so by coming along to our debating workshops held on Wednesday evenings at 7 p.m. Drop an email to debating@cus.org if you'd like further details of that. It really is tremendously fun and intensely rewarding. With that said, thank you very much and enjoy the main debate.